minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
It's the Rocket Hour. Y'all are now tuned in. Time to hit the pick four that you'd love to win. If your money's coming slow, step on the faster track with your host, Ricky Pasternak. Let's go.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. You know, every time we play the video, I keep thinking to myself, how do I get this to be my ringtone? Because I would love to wake up to my own ringtone in the morning. I'll have to text Ryan Stillman to help me work that out. Anyway, we had some great racing on Monday from Santa Anita that we're obviously going to talk about. You hit. So we're definitely going to give you all the shine when it comes to that segment. But let's get started with today's card. It's a good card. We were kind of talking about it before, and one of the things we always try to do is not talk about the horses we like and dislike, so we make the show more interesting. So we never really try to plan. Once in a while we do, we're not going to lie. But for the sake of we want it to be spontaneous. So as spontaneous as possible, I should say. So let's get right into it. We'll show you the PPs for today's late pick four as always. You're going to show them right there. That's starting with race 7. It's allowance optional claiming for $16,000 for Florida breds, 4-year-olds and upward, and all that other good language. 8.5 furlongs on the turf, 1 1/16 miles. That will be 2 turns. Where do we start here? I'll start. I thought this was one of the better races on this in the sequence, which is always nice. To kind of kick off. I love these Florida bred allowance races. I think they're really, really competitive. You have some class droppers. You have some horses that are moving up. My top choice was the 1, Freedom Matters. And before I start, let's scroll our ticket here at the bottom for you guys. I love the fact that this horse has been competitive. Had tried this level last time out, but I really thought that after looking at last race, I think Sham Rocket is a really, really, really talented horse. So I don't necessarily think that I think this race kind of comes up a little bit easier. Obviously, I think that Sham Rocket was actually the first ever Rocket Hour, I believe, that we were kind of talking about it. I don't know if he was at the end of the card or at the beginning, but nonetheless, he's really, really talented. And I kind of made a note to myself, I want a lot of horses out of that race. I was a little disappointed he couldn't get the job done, but I think Sham Rocket beating My Point Exactly and Freedom Matters. My Point Exactly and Freedom Matters were horses that I wrote down that I kind of want back. I'll leave it. The other horse, I'm going to give you a price here. The 5 Super Watson. This horse also comes out of the same race, but I think the difference was he was a little bit closer last time out. This race wasn't all that fast, but it was competitive on the front end. And one of the angles that I always like to see, even if it's slow, and maybe we've talked about this in the past, just knowing their horses to your inside and outside might make the time look a little bit different. There's a difference when you're running those fractions and there's no one to your inside or outside. I think this is a horse that's not that much worse than Freedom Matters. And if I'm taking Freedom Matters at 3-1, I want this horse at 8-1. What did you think of the 5 Super Watson? Were you kind of on my horse, Freedom Matters? Because I really put a lot of stock into that race on December 23rd.
Well, first and foremost, good morning, everyone. Ricky just went on a 4-minute rant there, and I didn't get a word in to start the show. So good morning to everyone watching. I'm very happy to be on. I didn't know if I was going to get to talk today or not, but
yeah, sorry. I'm excited.
I really appreciate that, Ricky. All right, so for this race, the 5 Super Watson was not one that I was extremely high on, did not use in the top 4. I do like your top choice, though, the number 1, Freedom Matters, for a lot of the reasons you said. And I think this is a Ricky P type of horse, very consistent, right? Last 3 races, second, third. The big key for me, I played this horse $10 to win as my bet. The big key for me is kind of what you touched on. I think that race last time out was Sham Rocket, and there were a couple of other decent ones in there. My Point Exactly was another one that was pretty decent. think it was a much better field than what he will face today. So I just kind of think this is the class of the field. So number one, Freedom Matters, $10 to win. That was my bet. Now, I will say, out of the 4 races today, this one was the toughest one to decide what to bet, because I do like the 7 Rhythmia a little bit as well. And it's basically just a Safi Joseph thing. That's always a big factor. And 2 back, I should say, did win at this level. A little bit of a stretch out in distance today. I don't think that's a huge problem for the horse. So I did kind of like the 7. I almost played a 1-7 exacta box, but in the end, I liked Freedom Matters just a little too much. Another horse, I think Sure Seamus, if you're going to play like a try, something like that, I think that one's one that may get 3rd and might hold on, maybe even 2nd. I think that horse will set the pace. I didn't think this was a great race to play a trifecta in, only 8 horses, and I think the favorites are likely, 2 of the 3 favorites are likely to hit the board. So I kind of shied away from that. But if you like a long shot, say you like the 5 Super Watson, and then you want to kind of couple that horse with a horse that might hit the board, I would look for the 4. But overall, thought it was a straightforward race. I thought number 1, Freedom Matters, was kind of a standout here. So that's who I put the $10 win wager to kick off the card.
Because I owe you talking time, which I do, walk me through in real quick. You could do it real quick, take your time. Why do you think Freedom Matters is a single? Because we both had this horse on top. You played a win bet. I guess my biggest angle was more so that we've kind of seen these merry-go-round races there recently. And that was my angle. Is that kind of what you looked at, or did you kind of just say on paper, no matter how it's run, this horse kind of looks the best?
Yeah, basically the second thing you said. I appreciate you saying that I could take my time too. That's good to know. So yeah, the big deal with me was that race last time out. And you're right. That was the first ever Ricky's Rocket show, or Rocket Hour show, on December 23rd. And I put a $20 win wager on Sham Rocket. So that was the first wager ever cashed on the show. So Sham Rocket should be, maybe enshrined in the Rocket Hour Hall of Fame. By the way, Sham Rocket was about 25 wide in a Florida bred stakes race last Saturday and still got 2nd and ran well to kind of back up that performance. So yeah, for that fact, I thought Freedom Matters is just the class drop. Even though it's the same class, but it's a much easier field than what he faced last time out. I see Sammelbaum and Todd commenting that the 1 and the 3 have the same trainer, and the 3 has picked up Johnny V. Listen, Johnny V and I, we have a little rocky relationship after his ride on Authentic in the Preakness. So no, I'm not worried about that. Now, if say the 1 Joe Bravo hopped off and he's on somewhere else, I would take that as a little bit of a negative sign. But I'm not real worried that Johnny V picks up the mount on the 3. Main reason being, yes, I do totally agree that is a positive. But where are the other positives on this horse? That was kind of my thing. Like last time out was 7th in a $35,000 claimer. 2 back, ran at a similar level at Gulfstream Park West, was 3rd. I just didn't see the other positive signs other than, hey, Johnny V's aboard.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The one argument that I guess one could make is that Alan Owinski is training the 1, training the 3. I don't really know what really that necessarily means, but I guess Alan, he must think his horse has a shot if he has a horse that's 3-1 that we like, and he's going to put one at 10-1 on the morning line. That's an interesting angle, and that's one that I'm always in favor of if the horse is good. I just don't think the 3 is all that good. I definitely think the higher the race, or like the bigger the purse, the higher the stakes, it means much more. We talked about that on stakes races on multiple occasions. When you get to this type of race where it's the only lower level is 12,500 for Florida spreads at the allowance level, optional claiming, excuse me. So there's not really much lower they can go. I guess the other positive is he has no claiming tag. I guess you could look at that as well. I just think there are a lot of other ways, and we're kind of on the same page. The 1 kind of just stands out on paper. So that's just not necessarily a way I would go. But again, if you want to go with the owner-trainer angle, I always like that angle. I just think in this spot, the horse just isn't good enough. Let's move on to the next race, claiming for $35,000 to $25,000 for 3-year-olds going 6 furlongs on the dirt. I'm going to let you kick this one off. You know, when we were kind of talking about it, and I kind of said earlier, I don't look at the tickets, but I did see you had a try box in this spot. So you kind of tell me what your angle was and kind of how difficult this race was.
Yeah, this is the first of 2 in a row that I thought were very difficult races, and I thought they set up very well for a trifecta. So especially how I like to play them. And yeah, this race, you can definitely go a ton of different ways. This was the one I had the easiest time deciding the wager to make on this race, but the hardest time deciding who to use. I just thought, I've said this earlier on the show and previous shows, $35,000 claimers for 3-year-olds at this point of the season, I always hate them, because it really is telling me that, you're giving up on a 3-year-old pretty early on in their careers if you've already got them in for a claiming tag, or you didn't think much of them to begin with. And so, they're claimers already like this early. Like usually people have hope and will try tougher races before they drop. So I always think these are pretty weak. I put the number 1 Cobb on top. It took this horse 8 races to break his maiden. But when he finally did, he did it with Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard, and he did it pretty impressively by 3 lengths. Now, obviously, that was a much easier field than what he'll face today. But I like that Irad gets right back aboard. I thought that was a very good sign. And a lot of times in these races, I'll look at speed figures and don't take them quite as serious if I would say like an allowance or a stakes. And the reason being, I kind of think all these claimers are real similar. I think they're just real alike. And so I'll lean on connections or, maybe a jock jumps off one horse to another. But the Irad Ortiz in this case coming right back, I like that with Cobb. So I used the number 1 Cobb on top. Another horse I liked at a little bit of a price, 8-1 on Crazy Shot. And you look at this and go, okay, on debut at Ellis Park, broke his maiden. And those races at Ellis Park over the summer usually are pretty good for 2-year-olds. Tried the Iroquois next time out. Obviously didn't go well, got smoked. Tried an allowance after that. Once again at Churchill Downs, very tough allowance. A race that Mandolin won, who came back to finish 3rd in the LeCompte, which he wasn't great. But in this field, he would be 1 to 100. So now taking a giant class drop, also cutting back in distance slightly. So I thought at 8-1, Crazy Shot made a lot of sense. Those are my top 2. I'll kick it to you before I talk about the next 2.
Real quick before I go, how do we pronounce? Is it Mandalun? Do we know?
Yeah, I've heard it both ways. I say Mandolin because I don't like Mandaloon personally. If it was Mandaloon, I think there should be 2 O's, not an O and a U.
That's fair. I guess the only way I looked at it was Soup, S-O-U-P. But okay, who knows? I completely agree with your assessment of Crazy Shot. I think if you don't use Crazy Shot, you're just crazy. Say 8-1 on the morning line. Look, that's one of the toughest allowance optional claiming races that you will see. I just, to face a horse like that at that level, that's just unfortunate. I hate to say it, that you don't see though many of those horses run at that spot, and 51-1 was an indication. The fact he even beat a few horses was he probably outran his odds. The one pause for concern I have is Arnold's percentages at Gulfstream. It's not great. This is one of those where you kind of look at it and say, well, this horse is one of the better ones that Rusty's got down there, or his runners just aren't running well. And there are 2 ways to look at it. And I've used that angle where it's like, look, I'm not playing this trainer until they get the job done. But nonetheless, I think this is a horse you just have to use because of the class, the runners he's been facing. My top choice was the 5 Carson City Kid. I don't look at this field, and I don't really say this too often. This is a dirt sprint. I don't see a ton of speed in here. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I went. I think if we kind of look at the races when when he was in Mark Cassie's barn earlier last year around the fall, I just think those horses come up a little bit better. Making the switch to Kelly Breen is interesting. A lot of people, one for myself, don't love when you go from a Chad Brown to a Rudy Rodriguez or something like that. I don't necessarily know if this is a down tick, because I think this race, even though it's the same as last time out, I kind of think this feels a little bit softer. I do like the fact he was the favorite, even though he wasn't good. I just kind of see this horse getting on the front end. If you kind of look at his riders, he's had Emisael Jaramillo, and Tyler Gaffleone. I think Luis Saez is going to get this horse to the front, and I'm just looking for the speed, and I don't really see it. The 6th, Palladio, was the other horse that I looked to, and I'm going to look at this horse, and I'm going to focus on the race 3 races back. It was over a sloppy track, but if we're looking at these claiming races, you kind of see all those AOCs and allowance at the state bred level a couple weeks ago. The race 3 starts back with starter optional claiming 40,000. That's probably the most similar. If you take his last 6, which that's what I like to focus on, that's the most similar to what he's going to see here. You can look at it 2 ways. He really likes to slop because he has a win and a second in 2 starts, so maybe he really does, and he's better on the slop or a muddy track. Or this is where he belongs. I'm going to take the latter of the 2 and use that horse. So in this sequence, I went with the 5, 6, 7. The only thing about Cobb, to your point, I love Irad gets aboard. I just think this is a pretty big jump, and that's why I wasn't on the 2. Florida Endeavor, who's also coming off a maiden claiming win as well. What did you think of the 5 Carson City Kid or the 6 Palladio?
Yeah, the Carson City Kid is strictly a pace play for me. It's definitely a horse that I did use in the trifecta. I definitely think this horse can hit the number, even maybe if he fades, gets 2nd or 3rd. I think that's very likely, because you're right. I don't see a ton of other speed in the race. And also Luis Saez jumping aboard. I think you'd have to be kind of crazy if you're playing a trifecta and you don't use the 5. So I thought he was an automatic kind of throw in. The other horse I used was the horse you kind of tossed, the 2. I thought if there was going to be another speed horse in the race, it might come from the 2. Last time out, it was a really low race at Gulfstream Park, the lowest you can run, $12,000 maiden claimer. But got claimed out of that race. Abreu now trains the horse pretty good off the claim, and pretty good when he gets Tyler Gaffleone aboard. They do not ride, Tyler Gaffleone does not ride for Abreu a lot, but when he does, those horses usually run well. 5 times in the last year they've hooked up, and 4 of those 5 times the horses at least hit the board. So from my standpoint of what I'm looking at for a trifecta, this is another horse that could get out in front and could stay where there's not a lot of horses that are really going to close late. So I definitely think number 2, Florida Endeavor, is another horse that could hit the board here. So overall, I went a 50-cent try box with the 1 and the 2, the 5 and the 7. So 1, 2, 5, 7 trifecta box for me here. Really hoping that 7 stays right there in that 8-1 range and gets up and hits the board. And then I think after that, it doesn't really matter who comes in. It's going to pay decent.
Yeah, no, I agree. If I had to choose between the 1 and the 2, I am definitely going with the 2. That was the horse that I kind of marked as 4th. So if there were one of the top 3, and we don't have any scratches in the spot. But if there was, the 5, 6, or 7 was out, I would have used the 2. So that was the horse that I really wanted to use, but I went a little bit deeper in the next race, and we'll talk about that in a couple seconds. But I also agree. I think if the 5 is going to be pushed, the 2 is the most likely to probably do so. One quick note on the 5, that last race was on the turf, and he will get back to the dirt. I forgot to mention that as well. I think that's important. If there's nothing else to add, we have a comment from Dennis here. Brisnet, I'm not familiar with Brisnet. So, Aaron, if you want to touch on Brisnet, I don't use Brisnet, never have, never will. If you want to touch on that real quick.
Right. Yeah. So I've never used Brisnet either. I am familiar with the Prime Power because Slim likes to use Brisnet a little bit. What I'll tell you about that is I would not expect that horse to be ranked very high in the Prime Power. One race, it was a terrible $12,000 maiden claimer at Gulfstream. The speed figure wasn't, anything special. So it's like, how is a computer ranking going to rank the two very high? When that computer ranking is talking about a past performance of 1 in a bad race. So in these races, or just overall, when horses don't have more than 2 or 3 starts, I would kind of ignore that prime power rating. Now, to Brisnett's defense, if you've got a field and they've all had a lot of starts, I think that becomes a little bit more of a valuable tool to look at. But you got to realize a computer can only analyze what you feed it. So you feed it one race at 12.5 maiden claiming at Gulfstream Park where the horse didn't earn a big speed figure. The computer can't look at it and say, well, Abreu has the horse now and Gaffalione gets aboard and all the factors that we can talk about and see. So that's why some races, maybe that's a little bit more important. Here, I don't think it's important at all.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really fair point. The more starts, the more data you could throw in there, the more importance it probably has. That's all I'll say because I don't use Brisnett. I'm not just going to make something up. Ninth race. This is very, very similar in terms of conditions, but this is for claiming $35,000 to $25,000 for fillies and mares, 4-year-olds and upward, going 1 1/16 on the turf. That is 8.5 furlongs on the turf, 2 turns again. This was the race, and I'll try to show as many entries here as I can. I'll scroll down. This was the race that I thought was really, really difficult. My top choice was, again, Makisupa. I think that's the way you would pronounce it. This horse really, really did well off the layoff. There's something wasn't right, which was interesting. She ran well. She was running well and got better in her second career start. So it was a little concerning. And I remember I wanted nothing to do with this horse because of the layoff the last time out, and I didn't like 4 to 5. I thought it was a very, very professional effort. It was able to sit on the front end. And I think that's the type of race that we're going to be able to see here. That's a nice price that Tyler Gaffalione is going to pick up the mount. There are a lot of horses that he probably could have hopped on in the spot, as opposed to some of the other races we were talking with Johnny V at the beginning. That race just wasn't as good. I think this is a much better field, and he might have had his choice, maybe not. I'm not going to speculate, but I really, really like that horse a lot. The other one was Come Storming. I've talked about this before. The races at Aqueduct are really, really good. Starter allowance 50,000. All those horses are better than this one. I'm going to leave a few of a couple other horses, but he faced another tough one in Candy Flower, who's going to show up here. He kind of went through the gate. He just didn't look. She didn't look right in that start, and I do like that Irad's going to pick up the mount. And now that you could just make the argument that that's Mike Maker, so he's going to pick up the mount for Maker. But he's probably another one who can probably get whatever he wants. That one race 2 starts back was the one that I really focused in on. It was his final race for Tom Bush, claiming 30,000. That's probably really similar to what she will see here. So those are the 2 horses I focused on, the 2 and the 7. I know you talked about a trifecta box last race. For this race, you said this was your 2 sequences. What did you think of the 2 and 7, and who else were you kind of looking to throw into the mix?
Yeah, so this is a great race for us because we both have the same 4 horses. You used 4 horses in the pick 4, and I used the same 4 horses with a 50-cent trifecta box here. 2, 5, 7, 8 is where I went. I don't feel like I need to touch on the 2-7 very much now because I pretty much agreed with what you said on all of it. And it's just one of those things where this is a perfect, I say this a lot on the show, this is the perfect classic play a trifecta box. It really doesn't matter what the odds of the horses are that come in. There's so many ways you can go. It's going to pay enough to make that bet worthwhile. So yeah, 2-7 I used. My top choice actually was the 8. And I think a kind of a theme of really the last 3 races that we talked about. We talked about Luis Saez getting on the 5 and showing speed. I'll go right back here with Candy Flower, the 8. I almost played a win on this horse, but the try was just a little too tempting to me. Number 8, Candy Flower. Luis Saez gets aboard today. I'm totally expecting him to send this horse to the front. But the horse is drawn outside of most of the other speeds. So if there is somebody going crazy, Luis Saez can just kind of tuck back and sit in a nice pocket trip in second. But really, ideally, we want this horse on the front. Horses dropping down in class too. I love a speed horse that drops down in class. That is usually really, really a strong play for me. And that's what Candy Flower is doing. The only, I shouldn't say only, but I think the 9 is the other speed, but I think it's cheap speed. So I'm not really worried about that horse. The 3 maybe gets out there a little bit as well. But like I said, the 8 has drawn outside the 3. So I think Luis Saez can kind of toy with that 3. Saez versus Lannery, I'll take Saez. So I really am pretty high on this 8 Candy Flower. That's who I put on top. The other horse that I mentioned that I used was the 5, Pardon My Heart. Definitely a one-dimensional horse in my estimation. Definitely one that's just going to make one run at the end. This is not a horse necessarily that I would play in a multi-race wager, but again, for what I'm trying to do and what I like to do, I've got to look for that horse that might close late and get third. And that's the Pardon My Heart has that written all over it, right? I would be really surprised if the horse wins. I think the only way the 5 wins is if there is a pace duel up front, and I don't really see it. But I do think the 5 could hit the board. So that's the other one I used. Pretty straightforward for both of us. 2, 5, 7, 8 try box for me, and you're using those 4 horses in your pick 4.
Yeah, and I promise, like I said at the beginning, we did not collaborate. It is nice though, seriously, when we have the 4 horses, it kind of stinks that we don't have really too many prices, but this does look like a really, really, really solid betting race, and that's all you can hope for. I don't see any massive favorites in here. Maybe there is one, but I wouldn't be shocked if a favorite's 5-2 in this spot, which is good. Whether you're playing multi-race, whether you're playing race by race, that's what you want. So you should get value if you can make a case for any of them. There is a comment here from Dennis.
Mm-hmm.
What about the 9? I don't think the races that she ran were all that bad. The problem for me is that I think the horses that are coming in that are either shipping in or dropping in or trying winners like the 7 are probably a little bit better. If these were runners that were trying this level again or maybe moving up, that's fine, but I think the 9 is taking a significant step up, and their other runners, again, you have the race from Aqueduct with the 2 come storming, the 7 Maki Supa that are coming in. The 8 Candy Flower coming out of a few starts back. The 7's going to be trying facing winners for the first time, but that was at the maiden claiming 50 level, so this makes sense for that one. I think the 9 would really, really, really have to run a much better race. I guess the best argument you could make could be sitting that perfect trip in terms of maybe just sitting off the pace. I'll let you kind of walk through this comment from Mike. Mike goes, no love for the 11 adding Paco Lopez. I'll let you kind of touch on that one.
The horse I left off, that was my 5th choice. And it was between the 5 and the 11 as who I used for that try. I see the 5 and 11 very similarly. I think they're going to close. I think they're going to be passing horses in the stretch. I don't know. I just didn't like this horse quite as well as the 5. I don't think the 11 is a serious win candidate. I just don't. But yeah, hitting the board, yeah, I could see it. Like Jared, for example, will like to play a try sometimes where he'll single the 8 on top in the top spot. He'll go, I love that 8. I'm going to single the 8. And then he'll play like 5 over 4 or 5 horses over 5 horses or 4 horses over 5 horses in the second and third. If you structure a try that way, I think the 11 becomes a use, but I like to box them. And when you do that, you can't box 5. You're going to lose money most times if you box 5 horses, even if you hit them. So that was just one of the tough decisions that I had to leave out there with the 11, but I don't hate the 11.
Yeah, no, me either. That was the one that I kind of left off. I do think Paco getting a board is an important move. Again, this was just, to me, one of the probably the most competitive in the sequence. I just didn't want to go 5 deep. Probably could have, but because it's only a $36 ticket, I'm I'm afraid that if it does chalk out, I don't know how much value I would get on the 11. And to Mike's point, I think the 11 is going to take money. So that was just one of the horses that I said, if this horse comes in, it's going to only bolster the ticket price, and I don't know how much more value I'm going to get. But I completely agree. If you did want to use 5 in this sequence, from the pick 4 perspective, that is probably your 5th choice. In my book, it would have been anyway. Let's attack the final race here. Maiden claiming 20,000 for 4-year-olds and upward, going 5 furlongs on the turf. I have absolutely zero opinion, so I don't like this race. I'll be very, very blunt. So I'll let you take it away. I know you had a stronger opinion than I did, so kind of walk me through this race.
I kind of feel like Mike Somage, because remember the last time we were all together on a show, we got to like a shitty race like this. He's like, "Oh, I've got a huge opinion in this race." Guess what? I kind of have a huge opinion in this race. I played a $10 win wager on the 6 Blankenstein. Okay, so yes, first time on the turf, and that is definitely a question mark for sure. But let's look at the horses that have been on the turf. There's not a lot to write home about in this race. I mean, like you said, there's not a lot of great horses. So Luis Saez was on this horse for his $20,000 maiden claiming debut here at Gulfstream, and got out of the gate pretty well and just faded. Got beat by, just a real close 13 lengths. So nothing to really love. Now we get to the turf. Horse has got a lot of turf pedigree. And Luis Saez says, you know what? I'll stick aboard this horse. I'll try it again. I thought that was super interesting. I think this horse gets to the lead. I want a horse on the lead going 5 furlongs on the turf at Gulfstream Park. I think if he's out by himself, he might get brave. He might take it. If he improves off this turf, or jumping to the turf for the first time, I think he could definitely take this field gate to wire. And also, it's not like Delgado is a bad trainer. Like, he's a pretty good trainer. He has a pretty good win percentage. He's a little cold right now at Gulfstream Park, but overall, he wins his fair share of races here. So him moving this horse to the turf, if it was another trainer, you might say, well, they're just grasping at straws. I think he saw something in that race. He sees something in the training, and he says, you know what, I'm going to try the turf with this horse. So I'm banking on the 6 taking of gate to wire. I hope we get that 5-1. So $10 to win on the 6 was my play here.
So I don't disagree with anything you said. Again, if someone has a stronger opinion than I'm about to have, then please walk me through it, because I just didn't like this field. The 2 that I used were really logical. I'm not going to sit here and try to give you a price because I couldn't find one. The 7 Joyful Surprise is just dropping in class. I think being able to show speed at maiden special weight races is much different than coming from off the pace. Those horses we've seen at levels like this, if they're losing, they just tend to not want to chase. They don't have the winner's mentality for whatever reason. They don't want to run. But this horse has shown that he can be on the lead. I just think this is too big of a drop. I do like the cutback as well. I don't think this horse really wants to go a mile and a 16th. I wouldn't be surprised to see something that we saw at Kentucky Downs, maybe a 22-3, maybe 22-2, something along those lines. I think this horse is kind of a standout. And the other one is the 10 Grand Union. I just didn't want to be beat by this horse. I don't like this horse really at all. I would just be really upset if this horse won. The one horse, and I'm not going to expand on the 7 or 10 because I don't have a strong opinion, but I do want to pass this by you real quick. How about the 2 Fake ID? So let me run this by real quick. This horse was scheduled for the turf last time out. So I think I'm going to make the argument. And I didn't use this horse for this, but I do want to say, going to cut back in distance, was able to be somewhat on the lead. Guaco won last time out, and the next start, at the claiming 12.5 level. Does this horse have any chance? And I don't want to hear about time form. I don't want to hear about buyers because it's probably a really low number. But for the case that I just made, losing to a horse that won their next start and now going to be cutting back to the distance that he was originally entered for, I think at 15-1, if you're just looking for a price and you don't like this race like me, you would maybe consider a $5 win bet. You might get 15 to 20 to 1 on this horse.
I don't like to waste any money, even if it is $5. So I would not play the 2 fake ID $5 to win. I hate that horse. And you're right. I don't really care about time form or buyers in a race like this. It's kind of like the $35,000 claimer that we talked about a little earlier for 3-year-olds. So I do draw a line through that. But so if the horse maybe picked up a decent jockey, or something like that, then I would definitely take a look at it. But I just don't. I don't know. I just don't see any, or I guess enough positives to take a shot with the 2. Dennis. Well, hold on. Yeah, what did Samich say? Yeah, losing Barrios hurts. I agree. I think if you got a horse that's live in a race like this with all the jockeys you have down there. And I'm not even saying Saez or the Ortiz brothers. I'm saying, yeah, a guy like Barrios who can win a race like this. Absolutely, if he's on it, that makes sense. He rode him last time, and now I say, hey, I'm going to go right back and ride him again. But we got Rios. It's like, okay, I don't think they're too serious about the horse. I do want to touch, because I do agree with Dennis, want to touch on this. I'm really shocked you didn't use the 8. I'm obviously shocked you didn't use the 6 as well, but the 8 as well. Dennis, I agree with your thoughts on the 8, because I think the 8 can sit right behind the 6. And if the 6 just isn't good enough, the 8 will pass that horse with ease. And I do think the 8's going to have a 1 or 2 length advantage turning for home. And with these horses in this race, it might be really, really tough to get past him. So yeah, I agree. I liked the 6. I liked the 8. I did like the 10 as well as more of an underneath type. I don't think I would use the 10 as far as what you're doing. I just listen, 0 for 14 and has had chances at the level. I think that's the big thing. If you're 0 for 14, but this is the first time you're in a maiden claiming race, I definitely give it a hard look. But this horse is, let's see, been in, oh my goodness. How many? I don't know if I can count this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 maiden claimers in a row and has lost every one of them.
Well,
I want no part of that 10. I hope that horse gets bet at 2-1. Please, if you're listening, play this horse, please, out there. Help us with this price on the 6. I would take the 6 8 days a week over the 10. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I hate the 10. I think you're high for playing the 10 and a multi. But anyway, after all that, I'll still go back to the 6. $10 to win. Give me a horse that's doing something for the first time, has a positive jockey coming back aboard him, over a horse that's lost 11 straight maiden claimers.
So Mike's comment, I like the 9 and then the 5 as possible prices. 6 through 8 are logical. So we're not going to touch on the 6 through 8. I think we kind of did that. Let's talk about the 5 a little bit. Off the layoff, I'm trying to be kind when I'm looking at the 5. Tim Hills doesn't excite me as a trainer. Edgar Prado doesn't excite me as a rider. This horse hasn't been less than 56 to 1. I'm laughing because if this horse beats me, in all seriousness, if this horse is able to beat me, I will highly, highly consider my wagering strategy. Seriously, if this horse beats me, I will highly consider switching up everything I know about handicapping. If you look at the 9, that is a horse that at a price to me makes legitimate sense because I don't like this field. The 5, I don't know if I would have that horse. If me and that horse were running in the stretch, just me and him straight up, I would highly consider myself, which is saying something because I'm not that fast. The 9 has definitely shown, if you kind of like the 10 Grand Union, which I do, and if you kind of like the 8 Discreet Tune, the 9 wasn't that much worse. So I think that would, at least from my end, be the biggest angle. The 5 I can't talk about because that horse doesn't look anything to me. What did you think of the 5 and 9? The 9 seems very similar to the 10. The only difference is one is 12 to 1 and one is 2 to 1. So yeah, sure, I'll take the 9 over the 10. The 5, as you were talking, I was like, okay, I didn't consider this horse, but let me look. Gets Prado.
That's positive, right? Prado doesn't ride for the barn very often, 6 times in the last year. 3 of those horses have hit the board, so that's a good sign. Edgar Prado in this field is one of the top jockeys as far as this field goes. So I'm trying to make some positives. First time gelding, there's a good sign. Dropping a class, I'm trying to make some positive sense of it. Listen, I probably have to go all to get to the 5. But in this field,
we have and this is great. This is why I love, Mike's comments. So he 100,000 year gelding, yearling gelded and dropping, Prado sneaky. And then only 3 tries turf sprinting on the 9, the difference over the 10. I don't need any more convincing on the 9. I actually see that horse, so we'll remove that. Let's talk about this one for a minute, because the 5, but the comment said he gets Prado, and you said he gets Prado.
Yeah.
Prado was aboard last time out. So I don't think getting Prado is a good thing here. I'll make the argument that I'll have any other rider in this spot, because what did Prado do last time out with this horse? This horse, it says forwardly too wide and stopped. Anytime a horse, anytime the word stopped is in a comment, I am throwing that horse out. And then when you give me the fact that Tim Hills, when I downloaded these PPs, was 0 for 10 with 0 in the money finishes in those 10, I'm not taking him. And that's ultimately what we get down to here. I think Dennis really pointed it out. Violence. Well, I'll leave it at this real quick before we recap. In all seriousness, if you pay $100,000 for a 50-year-old car, it's still a 50-year-old car. It's not going to run like a 2020 car, even though you paid $100,000 for it. So I hope I'm wrong, because if this 5 wins, I will personally come on here tomorrow and say that I owe my handicapping moving forward to Mike Somich. So I hope I don't have to do that.
I've got to interrupt real quick. I have learned, after doing this show with you for a while and doing live shows for you, the best Ricky is a mad at Mike Somich Ricky. Like I've seen Ricky extremely entertaining twice. Once was when Uncle Chuck lost the Travers. I mean, that was go back and look at that. And then today with Make a Move. I mean, I love it. I think Dennis is right though. All the talking, I'm like, I'm going through everything. I'm looking at everything. And as almost as Dennis typed that, I looked up and I saw violence. There it is. There was your answer. Violence.
You know what the difference here is? At least I didn't like Uncle Chuck because I just thought I'm always real quick. I'm always biased against the California horses, just like Magic is biased to the New York horses, or East Coast horses, I should say. This horse right here, the 5, there's not one thing that anyone has said to me positive that has made me change my mind. Uncle Chuck was a really, really, really highly touted and really talented horse. Again, I do like the fact that he said, got to heat him up. I love it. Wednesday morning or almost afternoon, I love it. I love getting passionate. That's what we do here on the Rocket Hour. Without further ado, we're going to read off our tickets real quick before we get to recapping Monday. I will start first, starting with race 7. That's a sequence 7 through 10. I will start with the 1, 4, 5, with the 5, 6, 7, with the 2, 5, 7, 8, with the 7, 10. And again, my warning here is if you have any other opinions outside of those last 2 horses in the last race in the 10th, please use them, because I don't have a strong opinion. I'm not going to just, like you said, I'm not going to waste my money if I don't like any of the horses. So that's where I will stick.
So the last race, the post time for the last race, Central Time, is 4:13 p.m. I can't wait for like 4:18 p.m. where I give you the text and say, I told you the 6 was going to wire that field, Ricky, because you're going to be alive going into that last race. And Saez is going to win it by a couple of links, gate to wire. I told you. I can't wait. That's what I live for, guys. So, all right. Race 7. Let me collect my thoughts. I still love that you're so mad at Somich. Race 7. I did a $10 win wager on the 1. I just thought the 1 looked pretty tough there. Class of the field. Race 8, 50-cent trifecta box 1, 2, 5, 7. Race 9, 50-cent trifecta box 2, 5, 7, 8. I think that is the best trifecta race of the 8th and the 9th there. I think the 9th may pay the most. And then in race 10, I'm going to go $10 to win on that 6. Ricky Blankenstein, look out. Luis Saez, gate to wire. Hopefully we get close to that 5-1 in all seriousness, because that would be a pretty good way to end the card.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with this. If the 6 beat me, I wouldn't be upset in terms of that's a horse that I should have had on the ticket.
Well, that's why you should be upset.
No, I don't like him better than the 7, because I think the 7 is, to me, kind of a standout in that spot. I just think dropping into this class, if you got a chance to watch Kentucky Downs at all, you know what kind of quality they have there. And I think the race at the fairgrounds was strong too. It was more so of the fact that I don't know what he's going to do on the turf. More so if he had run the same race on the turf, I completely would have included the 6. We do have to get into what we saw at Santa Anita. So we're going to bring that up real quick. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to cash. And of course, it didn't last very long in terms of, we talked about this 6 horse, Oil Canite. I won't even talk for you. I walked this horse right into the winner's circle. I wish I was at the track, especially at Santa Anita, so I could have walked around with a painting on my forehead saying, "Don't bet the 6," because you know what would have happened? Everyone would have made money that day. I hated this horse so much. And of course, what does he do? The most professional effort, right on by, sat the perfect trip. We were both against this horse. So kind of real quick, what was your thoughts when you first watched this race?
Yeah. I wanted to throw my phone. And honestly, this race was the definition of why I don't like to play multi-race wagers versus playing race by race, right? Because I was 100% with you, Ricky. I hated the 6 so much. And then the horse, of course, wins and does it very professionally. So, yeah, pretty frustrating race. Extra frustrating for me, I had a $10 win wager on the 7. And we were getting 5-2, you know, so I was like, wow, that'd be a really good way to kick off this sequence of 4 races. And the 7 was making up ground late, just couldn't get there. Yeah, I mean, just really, really frustrating that the 6 gets the job done here. But, you know, it happens. I mean, sometimes you hate a horse and they go right to the winner's circle. Yeah,
I think you kind of said it perfectly. We walked this horse right into it. I like Cartelate. He was horrible. So if you're the Connections or you're listening, sorry. Absolutely dreadful. We're going to move on to the 7th race. And it really, you're going to see here that there were scratches as we move forward here. This was really about Mucho Unusual. I think you had a win bet on that on Mucho, I believe. I went all. I'm not going to get into it, but I just went all because I said small field. I don't know who's going to be on the lead, but I think Mucho just sat the perfect trip, and you kind of saw that around the backstretch when she was just kind of lurking, sitting right behind Brooke, who was DQ'd, and kind of thought that race was over. Is this kind of the way you thought it went?
I mean, you know, there's not a ton to say about this race, right? They all just kind of grouped together, and then Mucho Unusual just kind of outfinished them. I don't know who you take moving forward out of here. It's just going to be a situational play if you play any of these moving forward. That race just was what it was. I hate that saying, but really, what can you say about it? A 4-horse turf field going a mile, you just never see that. You might see a short field when they go like long, but 4 horses at a mile is just a really awkward race. Yeah, and the other problem, I said, hey, I'm going to play $20 to win at Mucho Unusual, thinking I'll get even money, and then the horse is 2-5. So congratulations to the cashing of $8 in this race. Almost got that $10 wager back here, but yeah, no, I don't take anything out of this race. I won't, when I analyze these sources when they start next, this race will have no weight on what I look at.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think if you're going to bet Mucho Unusual again moving forward, you'd probably want to look at the Robert Frankel race as opposed to this race, because I don't think there was much here. The next race, I just didn't get right. I thought I had 2 class droppers that were strong with the 2 and the 9. And you can kind of see here, look at the prices that are sitting at the top of the board. I had the 2 Tejan and the 9 Bam Bam again. And I thought I was going to be safe. The odds indicated I would be safe, but the chart here indicates that I was wrong. What did you kind of think of this one?
Yeah, this one really freaking frustrated me because I played a trifecta box and I used the 1 and I used the 6. So I had a 16-1 and an 8-1 hit the top 3. Of course, I didn't have the 10. So I sat here and thought, geez, could the 2 or 9 not have done their job and then the 10 get out of there? And that would have been a huge trifecta. The 1 was the horse I threw in at the last, coming out of that Los Al mixed race, going 100 yards. And I thought, he's here for a reason, and he's probably got some early speed. Guess what? He did. He almost wired the field. Yeah, I was sick over this because I was definitely, I felt like I handicapped it correctly. You know, I just couldn't get lucky. So, but listen, that's what happens. Sometimes you bet those tries and you feel like, geez, I can never hit one. Thankfully, the race we're going to talk about next that's not the case. But here, yeah, it was very frustrating.
Yeah, and that's a great segue because, like I said, I wasn't able to cash, but one of us did. So hitting at 50% is definitely better than hitting at 0%. This was a race that you were all over. We kind of agreed that the 10 Goldini was a top choice, so we can pat ourselves on the back, or at least I can, for that. I did like the 2L Joy. I didn't use the 4 Labor Union, but I did use the 3 Zafa. So I was actually all over this race, and this was the race I wasn't as confident about. The 1 Mount Pellier was not great, but you have the 4 Labor Union. This paid well for you, and I'll let you go here as I kind of scroll to the bottom with the prices here. This race kind of went exactly how you talked about on Monday.
Yeah, this was a really good way to end the sequence and to make, you know, pretty good money. I think it paid $82 for a 50-cent try, so that's good. That's kind of the range you want. You definitely want to get $50, $60 or more out of a 50-cent try 4-horse box when you bet it. So that was good. Yeah. This is a race where luck did kind of fall my way. The top 2 choices or the top 2 finishers were, you know, they were pretty looking confident that they were going to get there. The 3 and the 4 came down to a head bob, and thankfully the 4 got the bob, so the try cashed. I see this race pretty similar to how I saw the 9th today at Gulfstream, where, hey, we got a 5-1, a 5-1, a 5-1. It's not like you got huge shots in there, but because the money went so many different ways, it was able to pay pretty well. And I think the 9th at Gulfstream could be similar today. So yeah, it was good to get that nose bob there at the end and get the 4 over the 3, get this puppy cashed, and everybody made some pretty good money if they played it. So this was a good one. You know, going forward, we haven't really discussed any of the horses going forward that we talked about. I'm not sure if I want any of them going forward in any of these 4 races, right? I don't think they were great races.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I will push back, and I'll be a little facetious here. I do want Mucho Unusual back. So if I can get her back somewhere down the road, I think we would take her. But no, in all seriousness, it's a little joke because we know what Mucho Unusual is. Kind of just a great stakes winner. Will probably eclipse the $1 million lifetime earnings at some point this year. No, I completely agree. I think Goldini showed in this spot that he probably wants to go longer. So I think if you could drop him in to maybe a smaller allowance optional claiming, I think that would make sense. Or a high claiming race, I think that would make sense. Because he was pretty good. But to your point, before we wrap up, look at those odds: 5-1, 5-1, 5.5-1. Zafa 7.5-1. That is what you're looking for. And I think if we could re-handicap this race, the 1 Mount Pellier was one of the worst favorites in the sequence and one of the worst favorites on the card. This horse had no business being, 8-5, no business at all. And none of his races looked halfway decent at the maiden special weight level. He didn't really pass any horses. So if I knew we were going to get 8-5, I don't think any of us would have used them. I definitely wouldn't have. But we definitely got that race right. But you live and you learn. You take lessons away. It was our first time playing Santa Anita, so there's always, I should say, live on the show. I should say,
Yeah.
because we played every day, but live on the show. But without further ado, we do have some interesting news. Friday, Oaklawn Park. You are, I'm not going to say a native, because Oaklawn Park is a place. It's not a state or anything like that. But tell me how excited you are, real quick. I can't wait for it to come back. It's one of the better meets to me. Kind of walk me through your excitement and what you're kind of looking forward to in the first weekend.
Yeah, without Oaklawn Park, there wouldn't be a Racing Dudes. I can 100% say that. That's where I cut my teeth. Not just I, Jared and I should definitely throw him in there as well. That's where we cut our teeth. That's where we learned a ton about racing. And I'll always say my favorite weekend ever at the track was when Zenyatta came the second time and ran in the Apple Blossom. And then the next day, Line of David upset the Arkansas Derby at a huge number, beat a horse named Super Saver, who later came back in his next start to do what? Win the Kentucky Derby. So that was the weekend. I'll never forget this. My dad and I were driving home. We stopped at a little burger joint that we always stop at on the way home. And I said, I have to do something racing. Like that weekend was sealed it for us. So yeah, it's definitely a special place. Last year was so unique, Ricky, because Oaklawn, you would maybe follow Oaklawn on the big days, but when the pandemic hit, you were the NYRA guy at the time for the website, and all of a sudden, where are you going to go? I said, you got to go to Oaklawn. And, you learn so much about Oaklawn, and you got to be excited now that it's like, hey, I hit the ground running now. I know the connections, I know maybe, the tendencies of the track, all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited for you to kind of get a full meet under your belt now that you kind of got, half of one last year. So yeah, Oaklawn's going to be great. Friday's going to be awesome. We got a great maiden special rate in race 6. We've got a great allowance race in race 7. We got the Smarty Jones Stakes in race 8. It's going to be a star-studded kind of opening day there at Oaklawn. And also it's Pegasus Eve. So that Friday show is going to be jam-packed. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the Pegasus. The draw for the Pegasus is going to be in about an hour, so we'll kind of know the fields for that soon. So just a lot to be excited about. We got a lot of content, and it's busy week, but that's what we're here for. These are the weeks that get us the most excited.
Yeah, no, to your point, there wouldn't be the Rocket Hour. There wouldn't be Ricky's Rockets. There wouldn't be anything. I don't know if I would be working full-time if it was not for Oaklawn. Seriously, because after NYRA shut down, Aqueduct and Belmont, I believe. Belmont was probably still running at that time. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe not. Don't quote me on that. Yeah. But I was like, right, where am I going? I wasn't covering Gulfstream. It was just one of those things where it was like, for me, Oaklawn kind of became my place. And I remember when we were talking about it, we were wrapping up Oaklawn real quick. I remember we were doing a final. You guys were doing blinkers off, and you had me on just to kind of wrap it up. And we were kind of talking about Charlatan and all these different things we saw. And I said, my biggest takeaway, there's no turf racing. That was and I didn't know that. I didn't know where Oaklawn was. I'm like, Arkansas, what's Arkansas? And in all seriousness, I was like, I didn't know they had turf racing. So it was just an amazing experience. I still do want to get out there. I will, hopefully this year. We will work on that behind the scenes. But nonetheless, Oaklawn, Friday, again, it is the birth of Racing Dudes. Like Aaron just kind of gave you a quick summary for me. I don't know if I would be with Racing Dudes without Oaklawn. At this capacity, we wouldn't have a live show, all that great stuff. So tune in, obviously, Pegasus Eve. If you're working from home or you get a chance, try to listen to the draw if you can. I think Acacia Courtney will be calling it or helping MC. Thumbs up, 2 thumbs up there. So I got that right. 2 thumbs up.
No. I wasn't giving you a thumb up. I was giving the host a thumb up.
Oh, giving the host. Okay, good. Better yet, give Acacia Courtney the thumbs up. She deserves it more than me. That's a fair point. Thumbs up there. So yeah, if you get a chance, listen, they do a great job. Put it on in the background or try to rewatch it later. All that great stuff. But more importantly, folks, let's cash today. There's nothing like starting off your week, especially Pegasus week, with a bigger bankroll than when you started. So that's what we will do today. There's our ticket at the bottom. We read that off before. Good luck to everyone playing today. Send us your comments, feedback, what you didn't like, what you do like, all that great stuff. We want to hear it from you guys. So without further ado, that we will sign off today, and we will see you tomorrow, same time, 11 o'clock, right here from Hallandale Beach at Gulfstream Park. Take care, everyone.